The movie starts inside a secret laboratory where a scientist is working on a very dangerous project. He is secretly trying to create a stronger and better form of life. Whatever he is making looks important, but also very risky. But suddenly, something strange happens. An unknown man contacts the scientist through a computer. This man somehow knows everything about the scientist's secret work. He says he even knows that the project has already been shut down. Still, he tells the scientist that the work must continue at any cost. According to him, this new life form is the only thing that can stop something terrible from happening. The end of the entire world. Now the story introduces us to a man named Dr. Michael Swafford. He is a scientist who has already warned people about this disaster in a book called In the End, There Was Light. Soon after this, Dr. Michael appears on a TV show to explain his scary theory. He says that when a star dies, it creates a black hole, and at the same time, it releases a huge amount of dangerous gamma-ray energy. This energy travels through space like a deadly wave, destroying everything in its way. But here comes the scary part. The doctor reveals that one of the stars in the Milky Way has already died, and its deadly energy is now moving straight toward Earth. At first, this sounds like just another theory, but Dr. Michael looks seriously worried. He believes that if nobody stops this disaster, all life on Earth could disappear forever. Meanwhile, back in the lab, the mysterious man tells the scientist that finishing the project will not be easy. For this experiment, they need the perfect test subject, but not just anyone. They need someone broken from the inside, someone with a self-destructive personality. So the two begin searching all over the world, trying to find the right person. After checking many people, they finally find someone who matches perfectly. His name is Joe Steedman, a 45-year-old security guard. Joe's life is already falling apart. He struggles with alcohol problems, gets angry very quickly, and can barely control himself anymore. But things were not always this bad. In the past, Joe used to spend happy moments with his family. One day, he, his wife Heather, and their little daughter Zoe were enjoying time together at the beach. Before leaving, little Zoe suddenly noticed a lighthouse flashing its light in a strange way. Curious, she asked her father about it. Joe smiled and told her that the lighthouse was actually sending a secret message in Morse code, just for her. Then he slowly translated the message. It said, "I love you, Zoe." The little girl became happy, and for a moment, everything in Joe's life felt perfect. Soon after that, the family returned home, excited for an even bigger moment in their lives. Heather was pregnant, and they were eagerly waiting for the birth of their second daughter, Rhea. But sadly, life suddenly changed. A few years later, Heather became very sick. No matter what happened, she could not survive and eventually passed away. This completely broke Joe. He could not handle the pain of losing his wife. Slowly, he started losing control of himself. His anger became worse, and alcohol took over his life. Because of this, he slowly became distant from his daughters, and in the end, the family broke apart. As time passed, both daughters grew up, but their lives went in very different directions. Zoe tried to move forward. She worked hard and was now getting ready to graduate as a nurse. But Rhea's life became messy. She got involved with drugs and ended up in a dangerous relationship with a criminal named Nico. At the same time, something very creepy was happening in the background. The scientist had been secretly watching Joe and his daughters every single day through hidden cameras. He was collecting every detail about their lives, studying Joe like he was part of an experiment. One morning, the scientist watches Joe again. This time, Joe is sitting in a therapy session, talking about how much progress he has made. He proudly says that he has stayed sober for more than a year. Things also seem to be getting better for him. He has finally found a new job as a security guard at Red Lock. But most importantly, Joe wants to fix his relationship with his daughters. After the therapy session, he goes to meet Zoe, who has just returned from hanging out with a man named Michael. But the meeting does not go the way Joe hoped. Zoe is clearly not happy to see her father. Even after all this time, she still has pain and anger inside her. Still, Joe tries his best to stay calm. He tells her that he is changing, that therapy is helping him, and he truly wants to become a better father. Then he asks Zoe to help him talk to Rhea, because he wants to fix things in the family. To show that he really cares, he even gives her a gift he bought for her, but Zoe refuses to take it. She coldly tells him that she does not want to talk to him right now. Joe still keeps trying. He gently attempts to place the gift inside her bag, hoping she might accept it later. But suddenly, Michael gets angry. He steps in and tells Joe to back off. That one moment is enough to trigger Joe's anger again. Joe suddenly loses control. In anger, he punches Michael hard and pushes him against a fence, tightly grabbing his neck. Zoe gets shocked and scared. She screams at her father and tells him that he will never change. According to her, he is still the same angry man as before, and she wants him to stay away from her life. Hearing this completely breaks Joe. After finally calming down, he tries to apologize, but Zoe leaves with Michael without even looking back at him. Now Joe feels completely alone. Later, he tries calling his younger daughter, Rhea, hoping to fix things with her too, but she never answers his calls. Not knowing what else to do, Joe sits alone inside his car, feeling hopeless. As he sits there, painful memories come back to him. He remembers the last day he spent with Heather in the hospital. Heather already knew she did not have much time left. Even while suffering, she stayed calm and asked Joe for one important promise. She told him to take care of Zoe and Rhea after she was gone. Joe promised her that he would protect their daughters, but now, years later, he feels like he failed. His family is broken, his daughters hate him, and he has no idea how to fix anything. But then, something terrifying happens. Out of nowhere, a strange man suddenly appears in the passenger seat of Joe's car. Before Joe can even react, the man grabs him and starts choking him. Joe fights back and struggles to escape, but in the end, he passes out. A short time later, Joe is taken to a secret laboratory. There, the scientist performs something horrible. Using a needle, he inserts a strange device directly into Joe's right eye. After some time, Joe wakes up in a dark alley, confused and in pain. Suddenly, he starts hearing the scientist's voice inside his head. The device placed in his eye is now connected to his optic nerve. Joe suffers from a terrible headache, while the scientist calmly explains something unbelievable. According to him, Joe has been chosen to receive a kind of superior power. Of course, Joe thinks this sounds completely crazy. Then he notices a strange briefcase nearby. When he opens it, he finds pictures and videos of himself taken from hidden security cameras. This instantly makes him nervous. Inside the case, Joe also finds a gun. But the moment he tries to touch it, a horrible pain hits his head again. The scientist explains that he has activated a system that is sending information directly into Joe's brain. He says this information will help Joe complete future missions. Then the scientist shows him pictures of Zoe and Rhea, and suddenly, the situation becomes much darker. The scientist tells Joe that if he ever wants to see his daughters again, or fix his relationship with them, he must obey every order. Joe has no choice. Just then, a woman suddenly appears nearby and asks if he is okay. Joe immediately asks her for help, but the scientist suddenly gives him his first mission. He orders Joe to take the gun and shoot the woman. Joe is shocked. He refuses immediately. But then the scientist gives him a terrifying warning. If Joe does not shoot her within 5 seconds, his men will kill Zoe and Rhea. To prove he is serious, the scientist shows live footage of 2 agents secretly following Rhea. Joe starts panicking. Time is running out. Feeling trapped and helpless, he slowly grabs the gun. With tears in his eyes, he points it at the woman and quietly apologizes for what he is about to do. Then he pulls the trigger. But surprisingly, nothing happens. The gun has no bullets. Before Joe even understands what is going on, the woman suddenly attacks him. It turns out she was working for the scientist the whole time. She shocks Joe with a taser, and he passes out again. Hours later, Joe wakes up trapped inside the trunk of a car. Panicked, he quickly grabs his phone and tries calling the police for help. But the moment he tries to speak, he hears the scientist's voice again. The scientist warns him that if he talks to the police, he will be killed immediately. Now Joe realizes there is no escape. He has become trapped in something dangerous. Finally, the trunk opens, and the scientist gives him a second mission. Joe must take the equipment kept inside the car and go to an address sent directly to his eye device. When Joe checks the location, he gets shocked. The address belongs to Charles Margaret, the president of Redlock, the same company where Joe works as a security guard. Before entering, Joe is told to wear a mask, carry a pistol, and take a small black box. According to the scientist, this device can control the building's security system. His mission is simple, but dangerous. He has to place the black box on the main door, use it to get access inside the building, and then make his way to the 3rd floor where Charles lives. With no choice left, Joe follows the orders. Meanwhile, the scientist watches his every move through flying drone cameras. Joe knows that if he makes even one mistake, Zoe and Rhea could die. As soon as Joe enters the apartment, the scientist starts guiding him step by step. He tells Joe there is a hidden safe somewhere inside the house. To open it, Joe must force Charles to reveal the password. And if he refuses, the scientist gives him the same terrifying warning. His daughters will be killed instantly. Feeling trapped, Joe slowly walks toward Charles's bedroom with a pistol and flashlight in his hand. Trying to sound tough, he announces a robbery and orders the old man to show him where the safe is. Scared and confused, Charles quickly moves toward the kitchen. Hidden there is a secret safe, but strangely, the scientist is not interested in money or jewelry. Instead, he orders Joe to take the laptop stored inside. Joe turns it on, but the system asks for fingerprint access. Then something very strange happens. The scientist suddenly tells Joe to place his own finger on the scanner. Joe has no idea why, but he listens. The second he touches it, the computer starts running a genetic scan, and suddenly everyone gets shocked. Both Charles and the scientist cannot believe what they are seeing. The computer says Joe's DNA is compatible. Joe himself has no idea what that even means. Still, the scientist quickly gives him another order. Joe must connect a transfer device to the laptop and send all the hidden files directly to him. With no other option, Joe obeys. After a few moments, the transfer is complete. But now comes the worst part. The scientist orders Joe to kill Charles. Joe refuses immediately. He does not want to hurt anyone. But before things get worse, Charles suddenly fights back. The old man quickly grabs a vase and smashes it against Joe's head. The hit damages the device inside Joe's eye. At once, the scientist's connection stops working. Charles quickly grabs the gun and points it at Joe. But instead of fighting, Joe removes his mask and reveals who he really is. He explains that he was forced into all of this. Charles becomes shocked. Not only is Joe one of his own security guards, but somehow he is also the only person whose DNA matches the computer system. Joe still does not understand what is happening. He quickly tells Charles about the scientist controlling him through an implant placed inside his eye. After hearing the truth, Charles gets angry. He contacts the scientist and calls him completely crazy. Charles even says the project was shut down for a very serious reason. But before he can explain what really happened, a drone suddenly appears. Without warning, it shoots Charles directly in the head. Joe stands there frozen in shock. Then the scientist gives another horrible order. He tells Joe to take scissors from his backpack and cut off Charles's thumb. The scientist says he will need it for the next mission. Joe clearly hates doing this, but once again, he has no choice. After leaving the apartment, Joe receives another order. He must return to the Red Lock Company and secretly replace the local security guard. At the same time, the scientist sends another drone to the building. Quietly, it spreads tiny devices through the ventilation system. Nobody notices anything strange. But as soon as Joe enters the reception area, the scientist tells him to quickly wear the protective mask. And then, everything turns into a nightmare. The hidden devices release a deadly gas throughout the entire building. Within seconds, people begin falling to the ground. Employees, guards, workers, almost everyone dies. Only Joe survives because of the mask. The whole building suddenly becomes silent and terrifying. With the place now empty, the scientist gives Joe another task. There is a machine in the main room that must be activated, but Joe only has 4 minutes. And once again, the scientist reminds him, if he fails, his daughters will suffer. Joe quickly rushes through the building, trying to save time. Finally, he reaches the main room. The scientist tells him he can remove the mask, but when Joe looks around, he freezes. Bodies are lying everywhere. The poisonous gas has killed almost everyone inside. Then suddenly, one security guard who somehow survived wakes up. Before Joe can react, the guard grabs Joe's gun and starts shooting at him. Joe barely manages to dodge the bullets at the very last second. Acting quickly, he fights back, grabs the gun again, and smashes it hard against the guard's head. The man falls unconscious. Breathing heavily, Joe immediately asks the scientist what he should do next. But there is a problem. The gunshots have damaged the device inside Joe's eye. Because of the interference, Joe and the scientist can no longer communicate. At the same time, the 4-minute timer is almost over. Joe starts panicking. Completely lost, he tries finding an exit by himself. But just in time, the device suddenly starts working again. The scientist's voice returns. He quickly guides Joe to a central computer inside the room. Then he gives him a strange order. Joe must use Charles's thumb on the biometric scanner. Joe does exactly that. The moment the scanner accepts the fingerprint, lights suddenly turn on inside a huge hidden chamber. Inside the chamber stands a massive machine. Now, thanks to Charles's thumb, the scientist finally gets full control of the entire place. But the mission is not over yet. The scientist says Joe still has one last thing to do. He must enter the machine and activate another device from inside. Joe feels nervous, but with his daughters still being used against him, he has no choice. Slowly, he walks into the machine chamber. But the moment he enters, the doors suddenly slam shut. Before Joe can react, powerful energy starts filling the room. Joe immediately panics and begs the scientist to stop the machine, but the scientist refuses. According to him, the experiment must be completed for the good of humanity. The energy inside the machine keeps growing stronger and stronger. Soon it starts mixing with Joe's DNA. The power becomes so unstable that suddenly, boom! A massive explosion destroys the entire Redlock building. Minutes later, police helicopters surround the destroyed area. From far away, the scientist quietly watches everything. And strangely, he looks satisfied. At that moment, the mysterious man contacts him again and asks if everything went according to plan. The scientist calmly says yes. Not only did Joe survive the experiment, he is now ready for phase 2. Later, news channels begin reporting the huge explosion at Redlock. When Zoe sees the news, she immediately believes her father died in the accident. Watching everything beside Michael, she breaks down emotionally. For the first time, she feels guilty. She regrets not giving her father one more chance to prove he had changed. But then comes a shocking twist. Nearby, Joe suddenly wakes up. He is wrapped inside some kind of protective bag and finds himself back inside his own apartment. Confused, Joe has no idea how he survived such a huge explosion. He immediately tries contacting the scientist, demanding answers. But then something strange starts happening to his body. A purple light slowly begins glowing from his hands. Joe becomes terrified. He runs into the bathroom and keeps shouting for the scientist. But there is no answer. After everything he has suffered, Joe's frustration and anger start building up again. And suddenly, something unbelievable happens. His anger somehow turns into power. Joe punches the wall, and a massive wave of energy blasts through it, completely destroying part of the bathroom. Joe stands there shocked. Moments later, the scientist finally contacts him again. He happily explains that the experiment was successful. According to him, Joe's body is now stronger than ever before, but there is still more to do. The scientist says Joe must pass a few more tests if he wants to unlock his full power, and if he succeeds, he will finally get his daughters back. Joe is tired of being controlled, but he wants this nightmare to end. So, he agrees. He leaves his apartment to get his car, but when he reaches outside, the car is gone. Joe instantly gets angry again, and this time, something crazy happens. All that anger turns into a burst of electromagnetic energy. Suddenly, a nearby motorcycle starts by itself. The scientist explains what is happening. Because of the experiment, Joe's anger now turns directly into power. Then the scientist gives him another mission. Joe must go to an old warehouse. There, he will find Nico, the dangerous criminal involved with his daughter, Rhea. Joe quickly heads to the location. After arriving, he finally spots Nico. But before Joe can catch him, Nico blinds him using a bright camera flash. Then he quickly runs away. Joe chases after him, but Nico attacks from behind with an iron bar. The hit knocks Joe unconscious. Sometime later, Joe wakes up trapped inside a cage. Soon, Nico recognizes him. He realizes Joe is Rhea's father, the same girl he has been selling drugs to. Instead of feeling scared, Nico enjoys the situation. To make things even worse, he turns on a television, and what Joe sees completely breaks him. The recording shows Nico hurting Rhea while she is lost in drug hallucinations and unable to understand what is happening. The moment Joe sees this, his anger explodes. A massive wave of energy suddenly bursts out of his body. The power spreads across the entire warehouse and quickly turns the place into flames. At the same time, something unbelievable happens in the middle of the city. For a few seconds, a giant figure made of pure electromagnetic energy appears in the sky. Then, just as quickly, it disappears. Watching everything through his drone, the scientist realizes something important. Even though Joe has become incredibly strong, he still has not reached his full power. Back at the warehouse, Nico somehow survives the explosion. Still desperate to kill Joe, he grabs a knife and attacks him. But something shocking happens. The knife does absolutely nothing. Joe's body is now too powerful to be hurt. Nico then orders one of his guards to finish Joe. The guard pulls out a gun and starts firing, but the bullets simply pass through Joe's body like he is not even human anymore. At this point, Joe completely loses control. He grabs the guard by the neck. Then, using his energy, he destroys the man instantly. Now, only Nico is left. Terrified, Nico quickly jumps into his car and tries to escape, but Joe suddenly appears right in front of him. Joe starts firing at the car. Panicking, Nico presses the gas pedal and drives straight toward him. But this only makes Joe even angrier. Huge waves of energy begin exploding from his body again. And suddenly, a giant blast hits Nico in the car. Within seconds, both Nico and his vehicle completely disappear. Joe stands there in shock. He never wanted things to go this far. Unable to control these dangerous powers anymore, Joe contacts the scientist. He says he does not want to hurt anyone again, but the scientist refuses to listen. He warns Joe that he still has not reached his full strength and must go through more tests. This time, Joe finally says no. He tries to escape. But before he can get far, several police officers surround him. Joe is arrested and taken to the police station in handcuffs. Inside, a detective begins questioning him. The detective had already seen the warehouse explosion and now believes Joe is some kind of criminal. Joe tries explaining the truth. He wants to tell them about the scientist, the experiments, and everything that happened. But before he can speak, the scientist contacts him again. He orders Joe to warn the police about a bomb hidden in the city's shipyard. Joe has no choice. He obeys. The police immediately rush to the shipyard to stop the bomb. Meanwhile, Joe is kept under heavy watch inside the station. But then the scientist speaks again. According to him, this is just another test, and Joe is the only person who can stop the bomb in time. If he fails, part of the city will be destroyed. More than 20,000 people could die. And worst of all, Zoe and Rhea are also in danger. Hearing this makes Joe panic. His emotions become stronger, and suddenly, energy starts coming out of his body again. The power becomes so strong that Joe knocks down the police officer guarding him. Then he blasts straight through the wall of the station and escapes outside. Knowing there is no time left, Joe steals a police car and races toward the shipyard. But soon, police cars begin chasing him. At the same time, the scientist gives another terrifying warning. If Joe does not hurry, his daughters will die in just a few minutes. The pressure becomes too much. Joe's powers start spinning completely out of control. But this time, something unbelievable happens. His entire body transforms into pure energy. Now Joe can move faster than anything he has ever imagined. Like a bolt of lightning, he races across the city in seconds. Meanwhile, TV channels begin showing the police chase live. And for the first time, Zoe realizes something shocking. Her father is still alive, but she has no idea what happened to him. Before she can understand anything, armed agents sent by the scientist suddenly break into her apartment. Zoe and Michael are both captured. At the same time, Joe continues racing through the city, unable to fully control his powers. But suddenly, disaster almost strikes. The electromagnetic waves coming from Joe's body accidentally hit an airplane flying overhead. The plane immediately starts falling toward the city. For a moment, it looks like thousands of people are about to die. But luckily, Joe quickly uses his powers and safely brings the airplane back down before it crashes. Once everyone is safe, Joe immediately heads to Zoe's apartment. After everything that has happened, he just wants to make sure his daughter is okay. But when he arrives, something feels wrong. The apartment is empty. The only thing waiting for him is a computer screen. And suddenly, the scientist appears on camera. He calmly tells Joe that Zoe has been taken to his secret hideout, and if Joe stops following orders, she will die. But this time, things are different. Joe is finally tired of being controlled. Little by little, he has started learning how to use his powers. So instead of panicking, Joe touches the computer screen, and somehow, he manages to track the scientist's location. In just seconds, Joe reaches the secret hideout. The moment he arrives, he quickly creates a protective force field around Zoe and Michael. Then all hell breaks loose. Joe fires huge blasts of energy everywhere. The entire hideout starts breaking apart. Security guards try to stop him, but they stand no chance. Joe easily takes them all down. Soon, the whole place becomes silent. Finally, Joe reaches Zoe. Confused and emotional, she asks what happened to him. Joe promises he will explain everything later, but first he says they need to save Rhea. However, before anyone can move, Michael suddenly pulls out a gun, and without warning, he shoots Zoe in the back. Joe freezes in shock, but then comes the biggest twist in the movie. Michael was never innocent. From the very beginning, he was the mysterious man secretly working with the scientist. He reveals the truth. A dead star in space has released dangerous gamma-ray energy, and it is heading directly toward Earth. Soon, the entire planet will be destroyed. That is why they needed the perfect test subject, someone strong enough to stop the disaster. And when they found Joe, Michael got close to Zoe on purpose just to secretly watch Joe and his family. But there was one problem. Joe's power only grows stronger when he feels extreme anger. That is why Michael waited for the perfect moment and shot Zoe. The plan works. Joe becomes completely overwhelmed with rage. His energy explodes out of control. In pure anger, Joe fires a massive blast at Michael and instantly destroys him. But now none of that matters anymore. Joe rushes to Zoe. Sadly, the bullet hit her heart. She does not have much time left. Desperate, Joe tries using his powers to save her. But no matter what he does, he cannot stop her from dying. For the second time in his life, Joe loses someone he loves in his arms. And once again, he is helpless. But the nightmare is still not over. Soon after, the scientist arrives with a computer screen. Then he shows Joe something horrifying. On the screen, 2 agents break into Ria's house. Without hesitation, they shoot her too. The moment Joe sees this, something inside him completely breaks. His anger reaches a level beyond anything before. A giant storm of energy explodes from his body. Joe transforms into a massive being made of unbelievable power. Now, he is stronger than ever. At that exact moment, the scientist tells him to finish the mission. Joe looks toward space and finally sees it. The deadly gamma ray wave is rushing straight toward Earth. With almost unlimited power, Joe spreads an enormous force field around the entire planet. And just in time, the Earth is protected. The dangerous gamma rays crash against Joe's shield and fail to destroy humanity. The scientist watches proudly. His plan finally worked. The world has been saved. But for Joe, the cost was far too painful. Filled with anger and heartbreak, Joe takes revenge and destroys the scientist forever. But even after everything, Joe is not ready to lose his daughters. Using the last of his power, he gently places energy into Zoe and Ria's bodies. Sometime later, Zoe suddenly wakes up. She finds herself on the same beach where her family once spent happy days together. Her wound is completely gone. A few moments later, Ria appears too. Their father has somehow brought them both back to life. The sisters hug each other tightly, overwhelmed with emotion. Then, they look up at the sky. Far above them, purple energy continues protecting the Earth. And deep inside, Zoe knows the truth. Her father is still watching over them. Remembering her childhood, Zoe repeats the same Morse code Joe once taught her near the lighthouse. "I love you." And somewhere in the sky, Joe answers back with the same message. A father keeping his promise forever. The promise he once made to Heather, to always protect their daughters no matter what.